You know, there are a couple of narratives in particular that have emerged in the aftermath of this trial. And I know that there has been a lot of discussion about all kinds of narratives that have emerged from this and all kinds of themes and all kinds of truths. And we'll be talking about this for a long time. A number of people are. But there's a couple of things in particular and that have really been bothering me just the last couple of weeks, and especially. And one of them you can see in a recent post on Twitter by a writer. She goes by the name, at least, Ella Dawson. And I've actually followed her a while back, years ago, because I actually appreciated some of her activist work on something totally unrelated to MeToo or to political activism. And so I actually started off, I knew who she was when she started talking about the Johnny Depp situation and then the Marilyn Manson situation recently. Well, so anyway, I think I had unfollowed her later or had a new Twitter account or whatever, and so sort of wasn't following her anymore, and just recently then saw that she had picked up the mantle of Amber Heard and was supporting Amber Heard. Now, I've had a number of people criticizing me for my support of Marilyn Manson and also for my support of Johnny Depp over the last, I would say, several months. I mean, really from the beginning, I've received criticism for my Manson support, but it has really stepped up since the Johnny Depp trial. And I think that it's interesting how many Amber Heard supporters, even though there aren't many of them, of the small number that exist, how many of them are also really heavily invested in the idea that Marilyn Manson should be brought down and that it's a travesty of justice to even consider, to even entertain the idea that he might be innocent. And I've received a lot of criticism online. Ella Dawson, most recently, she didn't name me, but it's very obvious here in her thread who she's talking about. The truth is that the subject matter that I focus on, it's not only unfashionable, but as many of you know, it makes you a target these days, and it makes you a target on social media and on YouTube. I have had to fight, along with a lot of creators, I've had to fight for what monetization they do give me, and it's always subject to revision. And the most profitable and most popular video that I ever did, it was about the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. It was a takedown piece on Amber. It was an interview with someone who had been around her one night when she accused Johnny Depp of abuse. And anyway, YouTube, with no warning, they went back after monetizing it. They went back and reviewed it a second time because they had gotten some complaints from some Amber Heard fans, and they demonetized it. I have stuff like that happening all the time. It really is a battle. Like this Ella Dawson, or some of the other women, some of the other activists who post online who I think are well-meaning, well-intentioned, and really think that they're helping women, and may have been through things in their life. I mean, look, I'm just as apt as anyone else to admit that there are a number of shitty men in this world, just like there are a number of shitty women. There are shitty the human species and life in general, the world, nature. It is a fucking horror show. And so, yes, people have all kinds of problems. There's all kinds of people doing all kinds of things that are reprehensible in all kinds of ways. And so I know that there are terrible things that men have done to women. And I see women posting online, some of these, particularly some of these gender activists, and posting and speaking with such earnestness. And you do get the feeling that maybe at some point earlier in their lives, you know, they themselves went through something shitty. And I hate that for them. And I hate that for this world. That people do shitty things, that people can do shitty things to other people. But it is this resentment, and I know that you've seen it too, a lot of you who are supporters of Johnny Depp and supporters of other men who have been falsely MeToo. One of the things that I've tried to do on my channel is I've tried to show that, unfortunately, we may not like it, okay, but Amber Heard is not necessarily an outlier. And what I see with a number of these posts online is people either arguing, A, that Amber Heard actually was abused, that she was the abused party, that Johnny Depp did abuse her, and that what Amber Heard engaged in, it was, just as Amber Heard said, it was a kind of a reactive response or whatever, right? So I see that, and I see that with women, with writers like Ella Dawson, and with some of these gender activists. And I think what's going on here is that they are so invested. Look, I get it in a way. They are so invested in this narrative that women have been the victims of abuse, have been the victims of violence and harassment, and they're so invested in this narrative that a lot of this abuse has gone unpunished, and that we should be fighting for more of it to be punished, and for women to be able to live in a world that is safer, it's more accommodating, etc., right? Or as a baseline, a world where they don't have to be harassed and raped. Yes, I'm not against that idea in theory. The problem, though, is the complications of actually in the real world. You know, the ancient philosophers understood this. You know, you go back to like Socrates and Plato, for example, who understood the idea that the material world that we live in, by its very nature, it is imperfect. And so things are going to slip through the cracks. Not all who do evil will be punished, etc., etc. It's similar to the idea in Christianity that we live in a kind of a fallen world, okay? And so what I'm trying to say is what we have these zealots, a number of these activists. And so they're so blinded by that, by those good intentions. You know, it really is like what we saw in Game of Thrones. I have to say, let me just do a bit of a deviation here. I know that the last season of Game of Thrones, so I watched all, like a number of you, I watched all of Game of Thrones. Watched every season, every episode, and I was not a huge Game of Thrones fanatic, and maybe that's why the last season I liked it, because I was not as invested in the outcome being what I wanted it to be. I thought that the twist in the last season was brilliant because it was so true to life. And you might say, what do you mean true to life? Well, so often these people who become these horrible dictators, these people who start off as these idealists and these zealots who then end up, you know, sending millions to their death. You know, I'm talking about a lot of the idealists, the different ideologies throughout history, whether they're religious ideologies or political ideologies. How many people have died, either indirectly or directly, as a result of someone else's dream or someone else's ideology or someone else's zeal for justice or zeal for good to win out over evil, so to speak. And you know, you can just look at the ideals of what the Marxist-Leninists thought that they were doing, you know, with the Bolshevik Revolution, and then what that turned into. And I'm not trying to get off the beaten path here. I'm just saying that ending in Game of Thrones, where Daenerys Targaryen, terrible with the names, but the Dragon Queen lady or whatever, right? She is the hero of every season until the end, and then what happens? She becomes a zealot. She starts drinking her own Kool-Aid, and she misses the mark. She overshoots the mark. And that, you know, that we find that behavior in so many of the authoritarian zealots throughout history, who thought that they were on the right side, and the ends justified the means, and all of that, right? It is that zealotry often that we have to fear. So what am I saying? Where am I going with all of this? I'm saying that I see a lot of this online with a number of these activists who just cannot even allow for the possibility that there could be a hoax, that you could have a woman like Amber Heard who not only could lie about accusations of harassment and domestic violence and rape and all of that, but could even construct an extensive multi-year hoax, a hoax that she would end up pulling other people into. And that idea is so terrifying, is so frightening to a number of these activists, because they feel that it undermines their program. That much like Daenerys Targaryen in Game of Thrones, by the end they have become blinded and kind of dehumanized by their own zealotry. I see that online. I see, first of all, people just are, and they're contorting themselves every which way possible to have to deny the truth, right? About Amber Heard and about what really happened there. And then what I also see is this idea, well, okay, maybe Amber Heard, this is among some others, right? And there are a number in the Johnny Depp community like this. I'm not saying most or whatever, but there are a number of people in the Depp community with this attitude. Well, okay, Amber Heard, she was this uniquely, you know, evil specimen. And she did this, once in a lifetime, once in a century, crazy, never seen this before, hoax with, on Johnny Depp, ran this hoax on Johnny Depp. But aside from that, all the other women who accuse people of things are telling the truth, and we can trust the media narratives on the other stuff. And if somebody looks like they're weird, or if they've said weird stuff in interviews, or if they have a weird image, that they've cultivated throughout the years, or if you have more than one accuser, or you have more than one person attesting to the fact that this person did this or whatever, then of course we should believe that. And a number of these activists are really, I think, have been able to convince a number of people in the Depp community that the proper way to look at the Amber Heard Johnny Depp situation is as a kind of an anomaly, that Amber Heard is an anomaly. And I'm sorry, but that's, that's just not true, all right? I want to do a show later on about this. I will try to do one soon. But it is just not true, and it is not backed up by the evidence that we do have. There's not a lot of it, but the evidence that we do have, it is not backed up by that. This idea that women never lie about assault, or never lie about harassment, or never lie about this kind of stuff. It's just not true. How often do I think they lie? If you put a gun to my head and I had to come up with a figure that I think is accurate, I would say 20 to 25%. But I would be comfortable with saying even 10%, because even 10%, the truth is still huge. If you know as a police officer that 1 out of 10 of the women who are coming into your office accusing men of rape, they're probably lying. Or if you know that 1 out of 10 of the MeToo accusations that we see in the media are lying, then that's pretty powerful. Now you might say to me, well, look, I know that you defend Marilyn Manson. I know that you think Marilyn Manson is innocent of things he's been accused of. And there's certainly, have been a number of women who have accused him. And so, you just said 1 out of 10, or you just said 25%. Well, you're wanting us to believe, though, the Marilyn Manson situation, that we've got a number of women who are lying. Yeah, I do. And I would invite you to look at the video that I just made. I try not to make it too long. It's only 29 minutes, but a video that I just made where I put in as much information as I could get into one video as to why I do believe he's innocent, Marilyn Manson, and that these allegations fall apart when you start looking at them. But I have done much longer and more extensive interviews and more extensive videos on this topic. And the sad truth of it, and people can continue to deny it if they want to, but the sad truth of it is that when we bring in into the mix, when we bring into this gumbo, things like media incentives, interviews, photo spreads, Rolling Stone, getting cover of People magazine, when we bring in, the fact that Marilyn Manson had a very strange rock star lifestyle where he had a lot of women and men of dubious scruples and morality around him. You know how it is. People are trying to get stuff from other people in Hollywood. It's a cliche. How do you think a cliche becomes cliche? And so there were all of these women, unfortunately, a number of them, as Marilyn Manson has admitted himself, who were really fucked up, that he invited into his orbit, and a small slice of those women basically got together in a conspiracy. Look at my video, I talk about it in this conspiracy, and went after him for various reasons. Amber Heard is not an anomaly, and especially when we're throwing into the mix the stuff that I've talked about. We talked about media and celebrity and all of this stuff, okay? She is not an anomaly. And, if you look at interviews with celebrities, someone was just telling me the other day about Too Short, I guess the rapper Too Short, and how he said in an interview that he had been sued for child support by so many women. And he, of course, when he gets sued, he fights it, right? I guess he goes to court and he demands the appropriate testing and everything, and these lawsuits get thrown out. But what he said in the interview is that if he didn't contest these, he gets sued by so many women, and it's totally baseless for child support. Women claiming that he fathered their child. If he didn't contest it, he would just be on the hook constantly, right? Michael Jackson's attorney, Tom Mesereau, famously said people would be shocked if they knew how often not only Michael Jackson, but many celebrities get sued for completely frivolous things. Just look at the recent Johnny Depp Brooks thing. So, again, I think that it's very sad that a number of people, and I totally understand it, but it is regrettable that a number of people have fallen for this secondary line put forth. Well, Amber Heard, even if she is guilty, or even if she fucked up some, or even if it was a hoax, well, that's just one crazy thing. It has nothing to do with any of the other people who've been accused in the entertainment industry of MeToo type violations, and certainly not Marilyn Manson. And look, I have had people accuse me online of being biased. I don't think that they know what that word means. I have not checked out Edwin's Generation, his multi-hour brain aneurysm. No, I'm kidding. But his multi-hour live stream, apparently, I haven't actually seen it. So it could have been, as far as I know, he was very calm and collected. That's the way it was presented to me, is Edwin's freaking out. So I actually don't know if you were freaking out, Evan, or not. So, Edwin. But I know that Edwin was accusing me of being biased. I don't think you know what that word means. Biased does not mean opinionated, okay? I have been studying this, and I know that word sounds sort of pretentious, but I'm serious. I have been studying this situation since the first week it broke in February of 2021. It's almost a year and a half now. And so I've made over 60 videos. I've interviewed all kinds of people. I've interviewed a lot of people that I haven't even put on my channel. You're telling me that by this point I should not have an opinion? If you clearly have an opinion and you've studied it much less than I have. And so bias doesn't mean opinionated, okay? Bias means, to be biased is to have prejudged, okay? And I did not prejudge. Do you know what? I actually thought, before I looked into it, I thought that Marilyn Manson was probably guilty for the same reasons as other people. I thought, oh, there's a lot of women accusing him, and look at all the freaky stuff that he said, and look at how he looks, and et cetera, right? I'd seen Evan Rachel Wood crying before Congress. Honestly, I thought parts of that were a little bit strange, but I bought it. She's a good actress. And so I didn't come into this biased or prejudiced. And in fact, if you will go back and look at my first video, I guess you've looked at it, Edwin. I think I'm pretty clear in that first video, maybe even in the second one, actually. First couple of videos that I don't know what to think, but that here are these problems that no one has been addressing with these stories and with the way that these women have gone about this and with the contradictions. It wasn't until I think my third video on the topic when I said, okay, I'm really starting to think here. I think in my third video, I was like, I think I'm 90% now that he's innocent. I just don't think that someone, though, could take an honest look at the research that I've done and the interviews that I've done and dismiss all of it, or could take an honest look at all of the points, all of the counterpoints that I've raised, and not only that I've raised, but a number of people who have spent just as long on this as I have. The website Marilyn Manson Uncanceled, Stand By Your Manson on Instagram, and various other YouTubers who've looked into this. And so I just think that it's very biased of you. It's very disingenuous of you to just dismiss out of hand what I've presented as just kind of the ravings of a mad woman here. Or of someone who is just so blinded by bias, I can't see the truth. I have looked at the other side. I've seen Phoenix Rising like 3 times now. And that's the thing that I find oftentimes is that it's the people who accuse me of not knowing what I'm talking about, or being poorly informed, or being biased. It's those people who actually show signs of themselves not being very well informed. And, when someone like Ella Dawson, when she writes a long article about Marilyn Manson and about why, and validating the idea that Marilyn Manson is abusive and criticizing people like me for trying to vindicate him, when she writes a long article, and I read the article, I went on her website and I looked at it, even though she has me blocked on Twitter, which is another really irritating behavior of a number of these Amber Heard defenders and Evan Rachel Wood defenders, is that they almost always block or do not allow comments. And that's very unusual behavior for people who support Marilyn Manson. I have only turned off comments on 2 videos recently because someone I felt like was actually legitimately being harassed. But other than that, everything that I've done, everything on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, it's open. And it seems like without fail, all of the major accounts that are anti-Manson, like on Instagram, Manson is abusive, and some of the other Instagram accounts don't allow comments. or don't allow them from non-supporters. And then the same with the YouTube, a number of the YouTube videos, comments are turned off or they're only for supporters. And then certainly, you know, on Twitter, you know, Ella Dawson, I would love to talk about this, but she blocked me, and for no reason. I was not harassing you. And then after she blocked me, she posted this little quip about the fact that she says, isn't it interesting, or you gotta love it when you go to the page of someone who's criticizing you and you see that they support Johnny Depp, Marilyn Manson, and then she listed off some of the other men, Andrew Cuomo, that I think are the victims of a MeToo hoax. And then she says, in the post, she said, yeah, right, so I guess that the evidence, it vindicates all of those men. Yeah, it actually does vindicate all of those men. And I don't understand this perpetual confusion that people continue to have, or to pretend that they have, about what I'm doing on my channel or what I'm doing on Twitter. The reason why my Twitter posts and my YouTube posts are about men that I think are innocent is because the purpose of my show and the purpose of my Twitter page is largely to pick out the cases in which I think men are the victims of MeToo hoax and explore those, right? So yes, there's a kind of a self-selection that's going on. I'm selecting the cases in which the men are innocent. That's why you don't see me doing shows on Harvey Weinstein, okay? It really shouldn't take that many IQ points to figure out what's going on. And yet they act like, my critics act like it's some kind of conspiracy, like, oh my God, you know, she only talks about innocent men on her show. Yeah. It's just like people who do like true crime podcasts, they only talk about crime. Or people who do beauty podcasts, they only talk about like skincare and stuff. Anyway, so I read Ella's impassioned plea for people to be alarmed about Marilyn Manson's defamation lawsuit. We should be alarmed that he's suing his accusers, and we should be alarmed that now there's a contingent of previously pro-Depp supporters who are now supporting Evan Rachel Wood. Well, I read her article, and I read it twice. And her article has the problem that a number of these different articles, these pro-Evan Rachel Wood articles and pro-Evan Rachel Wood videos have. The same thing with a thread from that Camilla person, whether that was a real thread or a bot, I don't know. But whatever that turned out to be, or whoever she turned out to be, that thread had the same issue. They take Phoenix Rising as truth and then just present the arguments of Phoenix Rising. And so they regurgitate this idea that's been debunked. I've debunked it with several people on my channel. It's been debunked elsewhere. This idea that Evan Rachel Wood was raped on the set of Heart-Shaped Glasses, this major music video that Marilyn Manson did that she was the star of, and he got her the highest salary that had ever been paid to an actress for a music video at that time. Anyway, for years it was understood, and it was understood by everybody that was not a real sex. And I had people on my show, a woman who's actually there on set, for example, but other people who can attest to that. And yet it just gets regurgitated by these different threads and by these supporters of Amber Heard and supporters of Evan Rachel Wood. There's so much out there that is contradictory to the accusers and to their official story. There is so much compelling evidence on Marilyn Manson's side. And it's not just what's in his lawsuit, but yeah, his lawsuit's compelling too. Apparently one of the things that Edwin was complaining about is that I was repeating the things in Marilyn Manson's lawsuit as if they were truth. Well, on the one hand, I would say I don't see, Edwin, how that's worse than you repeating the unsubstantiated assertions of Evan Rachel Wood as truth that you and the others do in regard to Phoenix Rising and her allegations. But I will say, Edwin, the things that I talk about are the things that actually Marilyn Manson's team provided like actual evidence of. Like, for instance, the forged FBI letter that Evan Rachel Wood and her co-conspirator, girlfriend at the time, the FBI letter that they forged, Manson's team, they actually provided the letter. And you know what? Even if they hadn't provided the letter, guess what? Because I've researched the case, I also know that Evan Rachel Wood included that same forged letter in her court filings for the custody dispute that's been ongoing with the father of her child, Jamie Bell, who also doesn't believe her stories about Manson. Anyway, I would have known to have gone there, and because also you can get the FBI letter there in those family court filings, right? So actually, Edwin, as it turns out, there are a number of things asserted in Marilyn Manson's lawsuit, and that's not the only one, that we have evidence of. One of those things that you would know if you had actually given more attention to this case than what I guess you have up to this point, or if you approached it with a genuinely open mind, as I did. Now, I said earlier on in my program that Amber Heard is not an anomaly. I think it is important that we come away from this situation, and I'm going to get into this in future videos, understanding that sadly she's not as much an anomaly as we would like to think. It goes without saying that in any situation where you can hurt someone by falsely accusing them of something, there will be people who will be incentivized to do that. Or any situation where you can get a lot of really favorable media attention and maybe even kickstart your career in some of these cases, or in Evan Rachel Wood's case, you can get the kind of gravitas and credentials that you would need to be a real esteemed gender activist. In those situations, you're going to have more than just an occasional false accusation. Now, several weeks ago, I brought up a much lesser known situation of someone who is not a celebrity, not a Johnny Depp, not a Marilyn Manson, but someone whom I believe had been falsely accused of MeToo type allegations. I talked about the case of Dr. David Sabatini, this world-renowned biologist, world-renowned researcher, might have come up with the cure for cancer or something one day, but at the very least was doing real work, okay? This isn't just some like a stupid academic paper that no one's ever going to read or whatever. Like he was producing things that could really benefit humanity. And he lost all of that. He lost all of that when he was accused of sexual coercion and harassment by a woman, an adult woman, a woman who, when they began their affair, was 29, 30, a consensual relationship, and she was not his subordinate, and was not her teacher. He did not have any power over her, any of that. Go look at the video. I did a 45-minute video on this where I talked about this, and I got into some of the evidence in the lawsuits and so forth. Well, anyway, this guy, this scientist, this world-renowned, he's not a famous celebrity or anything, but has a lot of prestige in his field, scientist, not only lost his job at MIT, he's not a professor there anymore, but he lost his prestigious fellowships. He was working at different institutes, lost his lab, and even lost the jobs that he had with these pharmaceutical companies, where he was trying to bring different treatments to light. So anyway, and I talked in the video too about the woman who accused him and how she was recently just made assistant professor at MIT and has her own lab now and is basically living the kind of life that she took away from him. Now, you look at that case and what you see is that there's similar stuff going on to what we've seen in some of these other cases. She thought that she had found the woman accusing him, her name is Dr. Kristen Knaus. She's an assistant professor at MIT. She thought when she started dating him, it seems that she had found the ticket here. This was a man who was really esteemed in her field, and he was kind of what she, I think, would want to be later in her career. And I think also, I think she fell in love with him. I think that it was a kind of maybe a healthy obsession is what's indicated, I think, in some of the texts that have been talked about and have been brought to light. And they had a very no strings attached relationship. She went out of her way to make it seem like, oh, this is no big deal, this is casual. And then when he dumped her, when she wanted it to be more of a commitment, when she told him she wanted him to be her life partner, and he stepped back and said, no, I want to date other people, then what happened is basically she freaked out and she devised this plan to Harvey Weinstein him out of there, as she told a mutual acquaintance or coworker, friend of theirs. And so, if you look at the lawsuits and the competing filings and everything between these two, he sued her and then she's countersuing him and all of this. This is what emerges. And so I bring that up because one of the things that I was looking at over the course of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial is I was looking at this woman's Twitter, and I was noticing some of the things this woman who falsely accused the scientist. And by the way, she couldn't actually accuse him of sexual assault because he didn't assault her, and so she uses the squishy term sexual coercion that's becoming really, really fashionable now. You see a lot of people using it in regard to, the Marilyn Manson situation, particularly in situations in which the women can't actually accuse him of actual assault or don't want to. They accuse him of coercion. So she makes these accusations. He had to resign. He was forced to resign and lost all of these different jobs in various ways. When I look at this Dr. Knaus's page, this woman who brought Sabatini down, and I look at her Twitter page and I see her liking articles that seem to be pro Amber Heard, when I see her retweeting things, retweeting articles complaining about the skepticism now that supposed MeToo victims will have to face, it's just really infuriating, because this is clearly another example of someone who very much, I hate to say it, but very much like Amber Heard this way, just obviously refuses to look in the mirror and to take responsibility for the mess that she has created for herself and for others. And it is people like her who are contributing to the downfall of MeToo, you know? And so I bring that up because I want people to understand, and I'm going to be talking more about that situation as more develops with it. You know, NYU, they tried to hire him, and they were not able to. They had to drop their attempt to hire him because they were bullied by a small contingent of students and faculty that did not know the truth of the situation. I can guarantee you, I would 100% bet my life on this, that the NYU Medical School would not have tried to hire Sabatini if they had not been made privy to very, very conclusive exculpatory evidence. And I believe what happened, and this is what I've heard, is that they saw texts and emails very clearly showing what Sabatini's lawsuit claims, that this was retaliatory and that this was a consensual relationship, and she became retaliatory and made up this stuff after he dumped her. And so I know NYU would not, especially in this particular political climate, they would not try to take on that sort of liability if there were any truth to it. What they saw, I'm sure, is that this was a case of a brilliant scientist who, if they could get him cheap, right, because of these allegations, I think that he was probably desperate to go somewhere. They thought, wow, this is a great opportunity. We can get this guy and maybe get him pretty cheap or whatever, right, and come over to here and because he didn't do anything wrong, as it turns out. Well, they were going to hire him, and then they were bullied into submission by the media and by some of the activists on campus. So, you know, that's just a very sad situation. The point that I'm trying to make is Amber Heard is not an outlier. And whether we're talking about other famous media cases, like with Marilyn Manson's case, that would tend to attract a number of accusers, especially as it turns out those accusers were recruited. They were given a kind of a script. They were a checklist. They all wrote their statements together. Go look at my video. You'll see. Whether we're talking about the Marilyn Manson, that kind of an intricate hoax, or we're talking about something more mundane, like what's going on in many HR departments right now at the level of what's happening to this Dr. Sabatini, it is very, very alarming. And so I hope that my critics, if you're listening to this, Ella Dawson or Edwin or Camilla and some of the others, I hope that you will take to heart what I'm trying to say to you. Because do I seem like some raving lunatic? I'm not like the crazy girl in The Exorcist, all right? I'm not just like, I'm not just projectile vomiting nonsense onto you. I'm actually thinking about these things I'm saying. And I would like it if you would do me the courtesy of taking that seriously, even if you don't agree with what I've said. All right, everyone, if you appreciate my work, I would always love a tip. My PayPal and my Patreon links are below. Even a little bit goes a long way. It's very much appreciated. You don't need to be a member of PayPal to tip. You need to have a credit card. The sad truth is that at any moment, the capricious overlords of social media and of YouTube and Google can decide that based on flagging or based on baseless complaints from Amber Heard supporters, or Evan Rachel Wood supporters, that they can decide on a whim, basically, to pull the monetization for a channel. So we're always, those of us who make content, we're always on the precipice of being completely defunded. So anyway, but the most important thing, like that umbrella guy says, is that you're here, like and subscribe, all of that stuff, and I'll see you later. Bye.